The observation deck was full of quiet excitement. Soft lights glowed across the curved walls of the research vessel, reflecting off rows of advanced instruments and holographic displays. Scientists from the Visnari Collective stood around the central viewing screen, their eyes glowing with curiosity and confidence that I had seen that expression many times before. That little tilt of the mandibles, that faint shimmer in their membranes, the look that said one thing very clearly: this will be interesting. And of course, it usually was, but it was also the same look that said something else. We are the smartest beings in the room. Spoiler alert that we were not, but I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the moment when everything still seemed like a brilliant idea, back when the universe felt simple, back when humans were just another species to study, just another entry in our ever-growing database of alien civilizations, back when we believed they were weak. Subject acquisition confirmed, announced expedition leader Velkera. Her voice echoed across the observation deck as the containment chamber appeared on the main display. One human specimen. Adult male. Designation: Sample Theta 9. A few researchers leaned closer to the screen that I did too. Inside the sterile white chamber below sat a human. He was sitting calmly on a small metal bench, elbows resting on his knees, looking around the room like someone waiting for a delayed train. Which was strange. Most species did not react that way to being abducted by aliens. His file appeared on the screen beside him. Name: Jack Hollis, age 32, occupation wildfire fighter, location of capture Montana. Earth. I had no idea what a wildfire fighter was, but our scanners had already flagged something interesting. His muscle density was far above the average for his species. Not extreme, just unusually strong. He had short brown hair, tired eyes that moved constantly around the chamber, and the kind of posture that suggested he was always ready to move, always ready to react. Velkera gestured toward the chamber controls. Begin Phase 1. The room grew quieter. Environmental stress test. She paused before adding calmly, let us see how this species handles minor discomfort. Minor discomfort, that I would remember those words later. Mostly because of how wrong they turned out to be. The temperature in the chamber began to fall. Our instruments tracked it carefully. 22 degrees C, 18 degrees C, 12 degrees C, 8 degrees C. Finally, it stopped at 5 degrees C. Cold. Very cold for most biological species. That we waited. The human looked around the room for a moment. Then he rubbed his arms. Then he stood up and started jogging in place. Several scientists leaned closer to their monitors. Interesting, murmured Techner, our xenobiology expert. The subject is generating body heat through movement. Any species can do that, Velkera replied. Techner shook his head slowly. Not like this. A thermal display appeared above the chamber. Jack Hollis was warming his body through motion. Efficiently. Very efficiently. His metabolism is adjusting, Techner continued. Core temperature remains stable. 20 minutes passed. The human kept moving, jogging, clapping his hands together, blowing warm air into his palms, pressing his arms under his armpits. Cold, yes. Uncomfortable, certainly, but far from breaking. Velkera crossed her arms, increased the stress. The chamber temperature dropped again, this time to minus 10 degrees Celsius. Frost formed along the chamber walls. The human's breath became visible in the air. Now he expected panic. 17 other species had already taken this test. The results were predictable. The Blinthry lasted 6 minutes. The Cordovini lasted 11. The proud Zoltonians collapsed in 4. Jack Hollis lasted 2 hours and 14 minutes, and he never collapsed. Eventually he sat down, curled slightly, conserving energy, but his vital signs remained stable. Heart rate elevated, breathing controlled. Mind alert. Balapura leaned forward slowly. This is anomalous. That is a polite way of saying you do not understand it, Velkera said. Balapura did not argue. Because she didn't. Neither did any of us. One junior researcher spoke up carefully. Perhaps he is exceptional for his species. An outlier. A rare example. Oh, sweet, hopeful Prioth. If only that had been true. Restore the environment, Velkera ordered. Warm air returned to the chamber. Slowly the frost melted. Jack Hollis stretched his stiff arms and walked to the water dispenser that he drank deeply, then splashed cold water across his face. And then he looked directly at the observation camera and smiled. Not nervously, not submissively, but like a man looking at someone across a poker table. A smile that clearly said, "That all you got." Velcara's glowing skin patches flickered in irritation. Arrogant creature. Perhaps he does not understand the situation, I suggested. Velcara turned slightly. Then we will educate him. 6 hours later, Phase 2 began. The chamber went completely dark, that no light, and no sound, and oh gravity reference. The human floated in absolute sensory isolation. We had used this test many times. 43 species had taken it. The average mental collapse time was 9 hours. Jack Hollis lasted 17. Not screaming, not begging, talking to himself. "Okay, Jack," he said calmly. His voice echoed through our audio system. "You've been in worse spots." He paused. "Remember that fire in Bitterroot? 3 days in smoke, so thick you couldn't see your own boots." Another pause. "Yeah, this is basically a vacation." Someone behind me whispered, "Is he joking?" Jack kept talking. Movie quotes, bad singing, descriptions of food. At T1 point, he spent 40 minutes explaining the perfect way to cook something called smoked brisket. Finally, Velcura ended the test. "The subject is not deteriorating," she admitted. "If anything, he is adapting." I leaned forward slightly. "Perhaps we should talk to him." Observation only told part of the story. Conversation might tell us the rest. Velcara considered this, then nodded. "Activate translation." The lights returned to the chamber. Jack squinted at the brightness, then looked up. "Hello, human," Velcara said through the speakers. "I am Velcura, lead researcher of this expedition." Jack tilted his head. "Researcher?" He smiled faintly. "That a fancy word for kidnapper?" Some of the scientists shifted uncomfortably. Velcara ignored the comment. "You will cooperate with our tests. When they are finished, you will be returned to Earth." Jack folded his arms. "Will I?" He leaned closer to the speaker, "Because where I'm from, alien abductions usually don't end great for the humans. Your fiction does not concern us." Jack chuckled softly. "It should." His voice grew slightly colder. "In every one of those stories, the aliens lose." A quiet tension spread through the observation deck. Velcura's glowing patches flickered. "Is that a threat?" Jack shook his head. "No, it's an observation." Then he leaned back against the wall. "So what's next? Torture? Starvation? Sleep deprivation?" He shrugged. "I've done 72-hour wildfire shifts. Been burned, frozen, buried under debris. So, if you're trying to find my breaking point," he smiled again, "you might want to pack lunch. Because this is going to take a while." Silence filled the room behind me. For the first time since the test began, none of us felt confident anymore. Velcara slowly turned back to the controls. "Prepare Phase 3. She looked at the screen again. Physical endurance trials. Below us, Jack Hollis cracked his knuckles, looked around the chamber, and laughed. This ought to be fun. And that was the moment we realized something terrifying, that we were not testing the human anymore. The human was testing us. The chamber was still burning, or at least it looked like it was. Towering holographic flames surrounded Jack Hollis. Trees cracked and collapsed. Smoke rolled across the ground in thick waves. Human figures screamed in the distance, trapped behind walls of fire. But Jack no longer looked afraid. He stood there calmly, watching the flames, watching the people he could not reach, and somehow accepting it. Behind me, the observation deck had become completely silent. Velcara stared at the display, her bioluminescent patches flickering between anger and disbelief. "He should be breaking," she said quietly. "He is not," I replied. "He should be panicking." "He isn't." She turned toward me sharply. "Explain it." I looked back at the human, the calm in his eyes, the way he stood inside his own nightmare without collapsing. "This is not just fear to him," I said slowly. "This is memory." Jack spoke again inside the chamber. "You guys really don't understand humans, do you?" His voice carried through the speakers. "You think fear works like a switch." He kicked at one of the burning logs that IT passed through his foot harmlessly. "You flip it on, and people break." He shook his head. "That's not how it works." He pointed toward the screaming figures in the fire. See, when you fight fires for a living, he paused. You learn something early. You can't save everyone. The words hung in the air. Heavy, real, but you still try, he continued. Because if you stop trying, he looked straight at the camera again. Then the fire wins. Silence filled the observation deck. Velkera stared at the screen for a long time. Finally, she spoke. In the protocol. The flames vanished instantly. The forest disappeared. The chamber returned to its plain white walls. Jack stood alone in the center, breathing slowly. Sweat ran down his face. But he was still standing, still calm, still watching us. You done? He asked. Velkera didn't answer immediately. For the first time since this experiment began, she looked uncertain. We have gathered sufficient data. Jack snorted. That scientist talk for we got nothing. No one replied. He stretched his arms, cracked his neck, then looked around the chamber. So, what happens now? Velkera hesitated, and that hesitation changed everything. Because in that moment, she realized something that we all did that we had not broken the human. Not physically, not mentally, not emotionally that we had thrown everything we had at him. Cold, isolation, exhaustion, fear, and he was still standing, still thinking, still adapting. Velkera turned toward the research team. We will return the subject to his planet. Several researchers reacted immediately. Leader, the study is incomplete. The data, Velkera raised a limb. Enough. She looked back at Jack. We have learned what we needed. And for once, she sounded honest. The transport chamber activated 6 hours later. Jack stood inside the beam platform, hand in his pockets. He looked up at the observation window above him. You know, he said, you guys really need to work on your hospitality. No one laughed. You abduct a guy, he gestured around the chamber. Freeze him, starve him, make him run obstacle courses, he shrugged. Then drop him back home like nothing happened. Velkera activated the return sequence. You will be returned to the exact moment and location from which you were taken. Jack raised an eyebrow. That's so? Yes. Good. He nodded slightly. Because I got work tomorrow. The transport beam began to glow. But just before the lights swallowed him, Jack looked directly at the observation window at us. Then he raised 2 fingers, pointed them at his eyes, then pointed them toward us. I'm watching you. The beam flashed, and he disappeared. 0.3 cycles passed. After that, 0.3 quiet cycles. Routine research, standard observation missions, normal scientific work, and slowly, the memory of Jack Hollis began to fade. At least we thought it had. Until the alert arrived. It came during my rest period. A priority signal from collective intelligence. That I rushed to the briefing chamber where the rest of the research team had already gathered. Velkera stood at the center console. Her bioluminescent patches burned. Bright orange. That was never a good sign. We have a situation, she said. The main screen activated. Surveillance footage appeared. Multiple feeds, multiple locations. All from Earth and everywhere. Humans were doing things that made my internal organs tighten with unease. Velkera pointed to the first screen. This location is called Nepal. A human climbed a massive mountain in equipment, no oxygen. Just hands, rope, and stubborn determination. At this altitude, Velkera said, most species would lose consciousness within minutes. The human kept climbing. Next screen, Death Valley. Temperature, 54 degrees C. The human ran across the desert, running. Not escaping danger. Not hunting. Running for recreation. Another screen, Antarctica. Temperature, minus 40 degrees C. A human dove into the freezing ocean and started swimming. Premoth leaned forward slowly. Perhaps these are exceptional individuals. Velkera shook her head. That was my first thought. She activated another display. Thousands of data points appeared. Global statistics, human endurance events, extreme sports, ultramarathons, deep sea diving, skydiving, mountain climbing, ice swimming. Humans do this voluntarily, Velkera said quietly. They compete with each other to see who can endure the most suffering. Premoth whispered, that is insane. No, I said, that is humanity. But Velkera raised one limb. That is not the real problem. The screen changed again. Now it showed a human research facility. Scientists gathered around a strange machine, a familiar machine. My breathing spiracles tightened. That device, I said slowly. Velkera nodded. They are reverse engineering faster than light propulsion. Silence fell across the room. They used the radiation traces left by our transport beam. They follow the evidence. They solve the physics. I stared at the screen. How long? Velkera answered calmly. Intelligence estimates 5 to 15 human years. Primoth nearly collapsed into a chair. 15 years? Before humans reach the stars, Velkera confirmed. The room fell silent, because we all realized the same terrifying truth. We hadn't just studied humanity, we had accelerated them. We had pushed them forward, given them a target, given them a reason. And humans were very dangerous when they had a reason. Velkera looked around the room. There is more. She activated another feed. Human communications, interviews, podcasts, online discussions, and one name kept appearing again and again. Jack Hollis. My stomach tightened. He told them. I whispered. Yes, Velkera replied. He told humanity everything. She zoomed in on the discussion forums. Thousands of humans debating, arguing, planning, angry, very angry. They're not afraid, Velkera continued. They are furious. And now, she zoomed in on the FDL engine project. They are coming. The briefing chamber felt colder than any test chamber we had ever built. Prima spoke first. They cannot find us. Velkera didn't answer immediately. Instead, she showed one final screen at a shipyard out on Earth. Human engineers welding metal plates together, constructing something large, crude, inefficient, but unmistakable that a starship. Velkera looked at us. We tested human endurance. Her voice was quiet. We hurt one of their own. And now, she gestured to the shipyard. They are building ships. No one spoke, because we all understood the meaning. Humans were not just coming to the stars. They were coming to find us, and somewhere out there, Jack Hollis was waiting. 8 cycles passed after that meeting. 8 quiet cycles filled with something none of us had expected to feel. Fear. Not the sudden fear of danger. Not the instinctive fear that comes when a predator is near to. No, this was the slow kind of fear, the kind that grows over time. Because every day our observation networks reported the same thing. Humans were progressing fast. Much faster than any species had ever advanced after first contact. First, it was small things, better engines, stronger materials, new energy systems. Then the breakthroughs began, prototype warp drives, experimental deep space navigation systems, gravity manipulation tests. They failed many times, explosions, accidents, destroyed facilities, but every failure only slowed them down for a short time. Because humans had something rare among intelligent species, they were comfortable with failure. Failure did not discourage them. It motivated them. Every mistake became a lesson. Every loss became fuel, and behind all of it was anger. Anger directed at us. Then one day the alert arrived. Not from Earth, from the Proxima system, at a research station belonging to the Vesnari Collective. The distress signal reached our ship in fragments. Static filled most of the transmission, but the message was still clear. Station under attack, unknown vessel. Request immediate assistance. Velkera assembled the response team immediately. Protocol demanded that we investigate threats to collective assets. Our ship entered faster than light. Travel within minutes. We expected pirates. Or rogue artificial intelligence. Or perhaps a mechanical failure that had been misinterpreted as an attack. We did not expect humans. But when we dropped out of warp near the station, that is exactly what we saw. A ship. Small, crude by our standards. The hull looked uneven, panels welded together by hand. External equipment attached in ways that would make any Vesnari engineer faint. But it was functional, and more importantly, it had arrived using faster than light travel. Primoth stared at the scanner display. How? His voice shook slightly. How did they solve FDL technology so quickly? I answered quietly. Because we gave them a reason. The human ship was docked directly to the research station. Velkera activated a communication channel. Her voice echoed across space. Unknown vessel. This is Expedition Leader Velkera of the Vesnari Collective. You are currently violating collective territory. Withdraw immediately or defensive action will be taken. For several seconds, there was only static. Then a voice came through the speakers. A human voice. Relaxed. Familiar, Velkura. My entire body froze. I knew that voice. So good of you to answer, the voice continued. Save me the trouble of looking for you. Velkara stared at the communication console. Jack Hollis. Even she sounded surprised. You should not be here, she said. Your species lacks interstellar capability. A chuckle came through the speakers. Yeah, about that. Jack sounded exactly the same as he had in the chamber. Calm, confident, maybe even amused. Turns out when you leave traces of warp radiation on someone's planet, some pretty smart people can work backward from it. Physics is physics. He paused. No matter what species you are. Primoth whispered beside me. He came. Yes, I said. He did. Velkara straightened slightly. What do you want, human? Jack answered immediately. Answers. The casual tone disappeared from his voice. See, after you dropped me back on Earth, I started asking questions. I started digging. He paused. And I discovered something interesting. Silence filled the command deck. You've been visiting Earth for a while. Jack continued. 30 years. 17 humans taken before me. Velkara said nothing. None of them came back. The silence became heavy, because we all knew what the truth was. Velkara finally answered. They did not survive the testing. Her voice sounded quieter than before. Our earlier research methods were less refined. Jack spoke again, and this time his voice was cold. You killed 17 people. He repeated the number slowly, 17. And you call that learning? It was in the name of science, Velkara replied weakly. Jack laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Science. He repeated the word like it tasted bad. Well, here's a little science lesson for you. His voice grew harder. What happens when you take a species that evolved to survive predators, disease, starvation, and a planet that actively tries to kill them? Then his voice dropped lower, and then you make them angry. The sensors beeped softly. The human ship's engines flared brighter. You get this, Jack said. You get humans in space. Humans who remember. Humans who want justice. Velkara tried to regain control of the conversation. You cannot threaten the collective. Her voice sounded stronger now. We have hundreds of fleets. Thousands of worlds. You are one vessel. 18 crew members, Jack corrected calmly. Yes, Velkara replied. You are vastly outnumbered. Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke again. You're right. We can't fight your whole collective. A pause. But we don't need to. Velkara frowned. Explain. Jack continued. All we need to do is make sure you understand something. His voice carried a quiet certainty. You do not take humans anymore. Not one. Not ever. You spread the word across your collective. Across every species you know. Earth is off limits. Humanity is off limits. Velkara's patches flickered. You are making demands of a galactic civilization. Yep, Jack replied. And here's the alternative. His voice sharpened slightly. Next time one of you grabs a human for your experiments, we don't come asking questions. We come armed. We come angry. And we keep coming. He paused. And trust me, humans don't stop easily. Silence filled our command deck. The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Velkara tried one final argument. You are bluffing. Am I? Jack asked. He sounded almost cheerful again. Let me ask you something. How many research stations do you have out here? How many isolated facilities full of scientists? How many places that wouldn't last 10 minutes if someone decided to cause problems? He paused again. One small fast ship can do a lot of damage. And if humans start building more ships, well, you get the idea? Primoth whispered beside me. He's not threatening war. No, I replied quietly. He's promising consequences. Jack spoke again. We don't want war. His tone softened slightly. Humans aren't conquerors. We're not looking to build some big empire. But we protect our own. Always. Another pause. So here's the deal. You leave us alone. We leave you alone. You respect our boundaries. We respect yours. But you cross that line again, his voice hardened one last time. and you'll find out exactly how far human endurance goes when we're properly motivated. Velkera looked around the command deck. Every researcher on the ship already knew the answer. We had tested that endurance ourselves, and we had failed. Finally, Velkera spoke. Agreed. The word echoed through the room. No further contact with Earth. No abductions. No testing. We will spread this restriction across the collective. A moment later, Jack responded. Good. His voice sounded lighter again. Oh, and one more thing. Velkera sighed. What? We want the bodies. Silence fell again. All 17. Jack continued. We're bringing them home. Velkera closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. That is acceptable. Pleasure doing business with you, Jack said. There was that smile again in his voice, the same one from the observation chamber. See you never. The human ship detached from the research station. Its engines ignited. Then it turned away from us and began flying back toward Earth. That we watched the ship disappear into the darkness of space. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Primoth whispered. He was bluffing. I shook my head slowly. No, I watched the last trace of a ship vanish from our sensors. It wasn't bluffing. Because in 15 years, there won't be just one human ship. I looked around the silent command deck. There will be hundreds, maybe thousands, and every one of them will carry people just like Jack Hollis. People who survived Earth, people who learned endurance the hard way, people who do not break. The silence after the battle felt heavier than the war itself. Smoke drifted across the ruined battlefield as the last alien war machine collapsed into the dust. Commander Arya Voss stood among the wreckage. Her armor cracked and burned, but her eyes still sharp. Around her, the surviving soldiers stared in disbelief. They had expected extinction. Instead, they had won. Above the shattered horizon, the enemy flagship hovered like a dying star. Its massive engines flickered, struggling to stay alive after the human fleet's final strike. For a moment, no one moved. Then the alien transmission came that a deep, distorted voice echoed across every frequency. Human commander, identify yourself. Arya stepped forward and opened a channel. This is Commander Arya Voss of the Terran fleet. There was a long pause. Then the alien replied, quieter this time. We calculated your species would surrender within 12 minutes. Arya looked across the battlefield, at the fallen ships, the burning sky, and the soldiers still standing. You made one mistake, she said calmly. You thought humans fight to win. The alien voice hesitated. Then why do you fight? Arya's answer was simple. We fight because we refuse to lose. Seconds later, the alien flagship's engines died completely. The massive vessel slowly tilted in space before drifting helplessly into the planet's atmosphere. Across the human comm channels, cheers erupted. Not because the enemy had fallen, but because humanity had proven something far more dangerous. They were the species that refused extinction. Hours later, as the first sunlight broke through the smoke-filled sky, Arya stood on the command deck of the last Terran cruiser. Reports flooded in from across the system. Enemy fleets retreating. Occupied worlds liberated. For the first time in decades, the war was ending. Her second-in-command approached quietly. So, what now, Commander? Arya looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the rest of the galaxy was watching. Watching the species they once called weak. Watching the species that had just shattered an empire. Arya allowed herself a small smile. Now, she said, the galaxy learns why you never corner a human. The stars burned quietly outside the window, and across the void, a single message began spreading from system to system, a warning that a legend, the truth the universe would never forget. Humanity does not surrender, IT survives, and when pushed far enough, it conquers.